Mr. President, it's now been 26 days since House Democrats voted to impeach the President of the United States. This is a predictable ending to an increasingly embarrassing impeachment inquiry. Apparently, Speaker Pelosi, Chairman Schiff, Chairman Nadler, and others were in such a big hurry to get this done before the end of the year, they've obviously gotten cold feet because they've refused to present the articles of impeachment to the Senate so we can have the trial. And as the presiding officer knows, ordinarily, if you are presented with a situation where the prosecution refuses to proceed to put on evidence in the case, they are dismissed. And it's a routine matter, dismissal for want of prosecution. Or if, in fact, they do intend to present the articles of impeachment, there is this fundamental notion of basic fairness included in the guarantee of a speedy trial that is obviously being neglected, avoided, and abused by the Speaker and her leaders in the House. Our Democratic colleagues in the House rushed through their investigation in only 12 weeks, and it ended up passing articles of impeachment on a partisan basis. After repeatedly saying this is a grave and urgent matter, it seems like Speaker Pelosi has experienced some buyer's remorse and questioned just how grave and urgent it really is. So here we are, as I said, 26 days later, and she still has not sent the articles of impeachment to the Senate. As we know, even though some have suggested the Senate could somehow proceed to trial absent the delivery of those articles here, we can't try the case until the charges are delivered. Well, finally, last Friday, the Speaker indicated that she will transmit the articles this week. They'll also have to name impeachment managers, representatives from the House that will come over and actually present the charges to the Senate and attempt to produce evidence in support of those charges. But it remains to be seen whether the Speaker will deliver the articles this week. She's been withholding them, as I said, for nearly 4 weeks now, claiming it's part of her strategy to get leverage over the Senate, a strategy that has yielded no positive results. In fact, what we've seen is the Speaker has zero leverage in the Senate. She runs the House, there's no doubt about that. But the Senate is a separate body, and we don't take our instructions from the House, just like the House does not take their direction from the Senate. Before the House even voted on the articles, Leader McConnell said the Senate should follow the same bipartisan framework used to guide the Clinton impeachment trial. I say bipartisan because at that time 100 senators agreed to this path forward. And the logic goes this way. If it was good enough for President Clinton, then it should be good enough for President Trump. Suffice it to say that the Speaker disagrees. Instead of sending the articles of impeachment over and letting 100 members of the Senate decide how best to proceed, she chose to take matters into her own hands. Apparently, the sole power of impeachment, as the Constitution describes the House's role, isn't good enough for Speaker Pelosi. She's now trying to assume what the Constitution says is the Senate's sole power to try all impeachments. But we shouldn't be fooled. Despite her claims, this is not an effort to create a fair process. A fair process would be like the Bill Clinton impeachment trial, which was agreed to by 100 senators on a bipartisan basis. Our Democratic colleagues in the House threw fairness out the window months ago. This is Speaker Pelosi single-handedly ignoring the express commands of the Constitution for her own perceived political benefit. Now, Republicans aren't the only ones who think the Speaker has gone too far. There's bipartisan agreement that Speaker Pelosi should send the articles of impeachment over here forthwith. A number of our Senate Democrats have expressed their desire to get started with the impeachment trial. I think the senior senator from California, our friend Senator Feinstein, same state as the Speaker of the House, she summed it up best when she said, the longer it goes on, the less urgent it becomes. So if it's serious and urgent, send them over. If it isn't, don't send them over. Irrefutable logic. Now we're hearing from a growing number of House Democrats who have split from Speaker Pelosi and say it's time to send the articles. For example, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee said, we control the House. Mitch McConnell controls it in the Senate. Senator McConnell might disagree with that, but that's what the chairman of the Armed Services Committee said. He conceded, I think it's time to send the impeachment to the Senate. Well, with Speaker Pelosi facing increased backlash from members of her own party, including her rank-and-file Democrats, you can't help but wonder who is winning this game that she's playing, because it's clearly a game. It's laughable to say that she's doing this for the sake of the American people or the Constitution. A new poll released by The Hill and Harris last week showed that 58% of voters nationwide think it's high time for the House to send the articles of impeachment to the Senate. 58%. This delay isn't putting President Trump in a bad position. In fact, it's further proving the partisan motivations that have been driving the House impeachment inquiry from the very beginning. Speaker Pelosi obviously isn't doing this for the good of House Democrats. Their role in the impeachment inquiry is finished. And as I mentioned, a number of her own members think she's making a big mistake by holding up the articles. And this clearly isn't giving our Senate Democrat colleagues a leg up. Several of our colleagues here in the Senate have voiced their desire to get this thing going, as one has said. In fact, I think it's actually harming our Senate Democrat colleagues who are on the presidential campaign trail. Can you think what Senator Warren, Senator Sanders, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Bennett, and Senator Booker, until this morning, who were all vying for the chance to be president, what they're thinking about the desirability of sitting here in the Senate chamber for 6 days a week while the Iowa caucuses are coming up on February the 3rd, the New Hampshire primary, South Carolina, Nevada, among others. The Iowa caucuses are happening just 3 weeks from today, and New Hampshire's primary is the week after that. These senators on the Democratic side who are running for the Democratic nomination, their campaigns are in high gear. And I imagine the last place they want to be is in Washington, D.C., sitting in this chamber during an impeachment trial. During the trial, every member of the Senate will be sitting in our desks 6 days a week until we're finished. And no, we won't have our electronic devices. I just saw a piece of cabinetry in the cloakroom where we'll be required to turn over our iPads and our iPhones. So this will just be us, not speaking. We don't have a speaking role. We have a listening role, sitting here for hours each afternoon, 6 days a week until we finish this process. Well, that doesn't leave a lot of time for our Senate colleagues who are running for the Democratic nomination to talk to voters in Iowa or New Hampshire. The longer Speaker Pelosi holds on to the articles of impeachment, the closer a trial gets to overlapping with those key dates. Now, you have to imagine our friends on the other side who are running for president are getting a little nervous. Cory Booker, who left the campaign trail this morning, recently said this trial could be a big, big blow to his campaign. Even a short 2-week trial could mean literally dozens of events we won't be able to go to. Now, while that is no longer true for Senator Booker, it is for the remaining candidates. Senator Warren shared this same sentiment, and she thinks being in Washington would prevent her from being able to build critical personal connections on the campaign trail. Had Speaker Pelosi immediately transmitted the articles of impeachment at the end of last year, It would have been the first item on the Senate's agenda when we reconvened in January. We could have used the Clinton model to guide the process, the same process the leader has promised since before the articles even passed. And I can't help but imagine the Senate and the American people would be close to putting this entire saga behind us. But instead, the Speaker sat on the articles. She stood in the way of the Senate's duty to try the impeachment trial, and she stood in the way of President Trump's due process rights. And the only people who seem to gain anything from this are the Democrats who are running for president, but who are not United States senators, and thus aren't going to be tied up during the impeachment trial. Oddly enough, one of these candidates and his son are looming figures in the impeachment inquiry. If you're Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, or any other candidate who isn't a member of the Senate, you've got to be glad that the Speaker sat on these articles for nearly 4 weeks. Having your competitors stuck in Washington, literally in their seat, while you're hitting the campaign trail, well, that seems like a pretty good advantage to me. The timeline that the Speaker created is all but sure to interfere with the Iowa caucuses. It's remarkable that Democrats' effort to impeach a president of the opposing party could end up having a negative impact on the presidential candidates in their own. All of this is to say, Mr. President, it's time to bring this embarrassing chapter to an end. Republicans and Democrats and the American people all agree that it's time to get the articles of impeachment to the Senate so we can try the case according to our duties under the Constitution, and the American people and the Congress can move on. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I would note the